Milwaukee is becoming a more and more attractive place to live, visit, and do business, says Mayor John Norquist. In his year 2000 budget message recently, the mayor said one reason for that is our educational options.
We have an education system that is becoming a real system. Public schools, charter schools, choice schools have focused their mission on serving students and parents first and graduating young people with the knowledge and skills to succeed for the rest of their lives.
Appreciate. That's the root word, or that's the main word. Good.
The parents of these third-grade children appreciate the opportunities they have in this school. This school is the YW Global Career Academy, one of 4 schools chartered by the city of Milwaukee. YW Global Career Academy is located in a former Montessori school at 46th and State. It just opened this fall.
The YWCA decided to get into the charter school business because we recognized there was a need for quality education for children. And the reason we're focusing on children is because we know that children grow up to be adults. And when you're talking about an individual obtaining a job that will provide them with the opportunity to be economically self-sufficient, we need to begin at an earlier age and start to expose children to a variety of careers and professions, as well as providing them with a quality education.
The YW Global Career Academy is designed for 200 students. There are about 80 this year in 4-year kindergarten through 4th grades. They plan to have a K-4 through 8th grade by the year 2004, with about 20 children per classroom.
I believe charter schools are important because it provides parents with an alternative to traditional education. And not to say that traditional educational institutions are not effectively meeting the needs of children. It's just an opportunity for parents to have something different for their children, and also for parents to have a stake in what's happening. One of the things that we have here at our school is a very strong parental involvement, parental and family involvement component, because we know that it's important for parents and families to be involved in the educational process of their children, because education does not begin and end in the schoolhouse.
The charter schools in our city said they are not necessarily in competition with the Milwaukee public school system.
Well, one of the things is that we are a public school, and so many people seem to make that misconception that we're a private or we're a choice school. We are a city public school that is available to any child in the city of Milwaukee, and one of the things that we like to do is to ensure that we are working together to meet the needs of all children. We are looking to provide some services with MPS or see if we can do some collaboration with MPS. It's just that we're looking at how we can independently provide an educational opportunity for children.
You believe the competition is important?
I wouldn't say necessarily that it's the competition that's important. I think what is the most important aspect is that children are provided the opportunity to learn. And if it means that the YWCA would get into the educational arena, that's what we decided to do.
I don't think it should be a big issue. I think the priority is kids. And I think if you just give families another choice, then it works. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of kids out there, and we need to give them all opportunities.
Virginia Flynn's downtown Montessori charter school is now in its 2nd year. The school and child care center is located at First and Pleasant, just north of downtown. There are about a dozen 3- to 6-year-olds in the Montessori charter school program here, another 10 in the 1st and 2nd grades in a facility near UWM. Again, parents were the driving force behind the charter school.
We've had parents involved in our school since the school started, and originally it started in 1976 as a private school and a Montessori school that had childcare before and after school. And the idea of having a charter school, again, the parents decided that they wanted to go in that direction. They wanted a Montessori school that had childcare, and they wanted to be able to keep their kids in the same school. We'd been a choice school, and that was good for a large group of the population, but there's still another part of the population that were city residents who were middle class or lower middle class who couldn't afford tuition and wanted Montessori. And that's how they got together, and they worked very hard, very hard. They liked the program the children were involved in. Montessori programs, there are few and far between. Although we have 3 public Montessori schools, they were always full. and the parents couldn't get into them. They wanted Montessori elementary school, and to be able to do that, charter gave us an opportunity to do that. And they had childcare, so they could bring their child here at 7 in the morning, and they could pick them up, at 5 or 6 o'clock at night. That's become more of an option for children in public schools now, but it wasn't years ago. And Montessori, private Montessori schools are very expensive. And so it's difficult for a lot of families to have that opportunity for their children. And this gave the families another choice, another chance to have the kind of education they wanted.
In addition to the Downtown Montessori and YW Global Career Academy, the Comet Institute opened last year at 47th and Fond du Lac with 54 students in its elementary school. It has about 70 this year. The Park Lawn YWCA building at 46th and Congress is the site of the Central City Cyber School, which opened this fall. The school, with an emphasis on computer education, has about 50 students. It will use the Park Lawn building until a larger facility is available. Charter schools are public schools that operate independently of the local school district and with public funding. According to the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, 1,660 Wisconsin students attended charter schools in 1998. Schools receive about $6,000 per student in state aid. Howard Fuller, former Milwaukee Public School Superintendent, a leading figure in the development of choice and charter schools, is now chairman of the Milwaukee Charter School Review Committee. He asked Alderman Fred Gordon to get the city involved in chartering schools.
And I had some interest in charter schools, and I'm a charter school advocate, a choice school advocate, and I talked with Dr. Fuller about it, and we thought this would be a good opportunity for the city to do something that was really precedent-setting. Charter schools, in my view, give parents options for education. I think the whole methodology around giving children the opportunity to go to school in whatever situation that they wish to go into is important. And I send my son, for example, to Milwaukee Public Schools. He goes to McDowell Montessori School. That's a Milwaukee Public School. So it's not that I'm against public schools, because I'm a product of public schools and I support public schools. But we also think that we need to give parents, particularly poor parents, as many educational options as possible.
For several years, Highland Community School at 20th and Walnut was the only Milwaukee Public School System charter school. Highland became an MPS charter school after operating as a private school. This fall, Fritchie Middle School joined the charter school ranks. The school on South Howell was the first to break away from the MPS central office and chart its own course. Walker International Middle School at 32nd and Mitchell became the district's third charter school this fall. They are still MPS schools, but major decisions about how the school is run will be made by a council of parents, school staff, community members, and the principal. With charter schools given substantially more freedom in handling curriculum, structure, money, and hiring than a school conventionally has, expect to see more of them in the future.
I think that it gives parents a very close connection to the school. It gives the staff a very close connection to what happens in the schools, and I think those are important. You find a commitment on all levels, and the size is different, so you're dealing one-on-one with people rather than a big administrative system, and I think that's an asset too. It can also be difficult sometimes, but it's usually an asset.
I think as people begin to really look at education, and particularly education for children, there's going to be an upsurgence of charter schools within the city of Milwaukee. One, because we're looking at educational opportunities that will provide children with the opportunity to become citizens that will be able to be effective in the community.
In fact, the City of Milwaukee Charter School Review Committee, which oversees contract compliance, has received applications for 4 more charter schools. Technical review hearings are underway on the applications, which were due September 1st.
As of that date, 4 applications were submitted, one is from Academic Learning Center, Inc., one is from Academic Solutions Center for Learning, one is from the Milwaukee Multicultural Academy, and the final one is from the New Order Neighborhood School.
A Dane County judge last July upheld the legality of the law which created charter schools in Wisconsin. The committee was told that could lead to even more applications to the city or to MPS, MATC, and UWM, but there are still some unknowns.
Is the city's charter school effort a backwater and sort of something that maybe has served its purpose and doesn't need to do much more, or is it something that is sort of lurking as a major area of growth? I don't know. There's so many things we don't know. Most of the schools put their applications together this year not knowing whether our law would be valid. Now next year, presumably they'll know that this city's authority is unquestioned. That may change the number of applications, even if nothing else changes. What UWM does, what federal courts do in the choice case, the school board elections. It seems to me that as long as MPS has the leadership that it has on the board and at the superintendent level, they're going to be approving a fair number of charter schools.
That would be fine with Alderman Gordon. He'd like to see continued city involvement in charter schools, but on a small scale.
Most of my colleagues are content with keeping it on a small level because we don't necessarily want to get into the education business because that's what MPS is for. But certainly for the opportunity to be involved in something that's precedent-setting and something that's evolutionary in my respect, I think that it's a good thing for the city to do. So we will continue, I think, to have charter schools by the city, but we also want the other entities like MATC and UWM and MPS to take the ball and run with it. We think that it's important for them because they're educational institutions, to be in the forefront. We'll be glad to, work with them and to walk side by side with them, but we think that it's important for them to take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and to go forward with this movement because it's a movement that I think is going to be beneficial to our kids in the future.
The scenario, a chemical weapon terrorist attack. The place, the Zablocki Veterans Affairs Medical Center. There were some fatalities and many others were affected by this chemical agent in this simulation. Emergency responders did not only treat the victims, they also had to protect themselves from the chemical agent. Nearly 24 agencies took part in this exercise: the Army and Navy, FBI, police and fire departments, area hospitals, ambulance companies, and social service agencies. For the participants, the evaluators, and those who watched, it was what was called a no-fault exercise.
It can't go wrong. There's no way it can go wrong. If things don't go the way we planned on them going, even that's good because we learn.
A hazmat team now! A hazmat team now!
A VA police officer, first to respond, also becomes a victim. But he's able to warn firefighters that this is not a usual response, that it's a chemical attack requiring special equipment and a decontamination of the victims.
We have mass casualties to the dispatch area. Would you please give us a full assignment and the hazmat team response?
Well, I'm very pleased with what I've seen so far. I think our emergency response personnel responded accurately. They assessed the situation and working together with the other agencies to put on a real good show here. And in this particular situation, they were able to size up and see that they had multiple injuries that weren't caused by something that's termed usual. And with that, they stepped back and said, let's assess this properly before we become part of the problem, and that was critical, and that's going to be critical anytime we have any type of terrorist activity and other unusual releases of chemicals. We've got a lot of the decon equipment, a lot of the equipment used for hazmat, the training necessary for going and preparing the hospital staff for receiving contaminated patients. Just a whole new wrinkle moving forward into another decade, another century, as far as what are we going to look to for the future as far as emergency response.
Oh, help me, I can't breathe. Oh, I can't breathe.
Well, this started about a year ago. The federal government came in, Department of Defense, provided training to the area of fire and law enforcement, and training was on weapons of mass destruction. And this exercise is a part or in the series of weapons of mass destruction training they've provided. We had tabletop exercise in the past. We've had training that was provided to all of our officers. And this exercise is kind of the culmination of all that training.
Triage has been set up. 11:05.
370 dispatch. At this time, we have approximately 36 injuries.
I'm just acting as a dispatcher, but if there's a CP set up, the CP handles all that traffic. So
if we were to have a real-life incident such as that, and it was a terrorism act, our department would serve a couple of roles. One would be site security while the fire department operates in their hazmat outfit. The other would be an investigative function, identifying witnesses, interviewing witnesses, trying to locate suspects, gather intelligence, etc.
Our role would be more on the periphery, the perimeters, than would be on the actual scene. We would be as a support or as providing assistance or backup to the different agencies here. For example, if the fire department determined that the VX was being transported by wind, we would have to shut down part of the freeway system, or we may have to evacuate County Stadium if this was happening during a ball game. We would also provide assistance here on the scene if the city asked for us for any purpose. For example, there were 2 bomb devices here, the actual one that went off and a secondary device. The city may ask us to come in with our bomb squad and work the secondary device while they work the primary device.
Primary response is for mass care. That would be feeding operations for emergency workers and depending on the nature of the event, of course, mass care to victims and their families as well. Another piece of it is mental health. We can work with them, help debrief them after the event is over. But again, if in a situation like this, we might probably see a family reception center set up somewhere nearby in a safe area where family members could come to inquire about members of their family who might have been affected by the incident.
A chemical or a biological attack can spread the problem far beyond the actual scene of the event. One example, the water used to decontaminate the victim could drain into city sewers, carrying the chemical to other parts of the city.
In episodes where there are a lot of casualties and where there may be a broader impact on public health, for example, the possibility that an agent is moving through the community, either a chemical or a bacterial agent, probably the biggest part of our job is to characterize what's going on with the assistance of the other emergency responders, and make decisions about who may be exposed, who may not be exposed, and to help with prevention of any further damage.
The goal of this type of training is to give emergency responders a better idea of the unique aspects of terrorism incidents, to evaluate the city and county response to an act of chemical terrorism in a public setting.
This is just an exercise today, but I think we're demonstrating that we're prepared to handle these types of situations.
Is it likely to happen here? I don't know, but it's nice to get some training in. And at least if we did have an incident, and this could apply to a regular hazmat incident, a tanker spill or a railroad spill, maybe not a terrorism act, but still a hazardous material release, this is a good training that applies to all of that, where us and other agencies learn to work together, and we can learn to coordinate and deal with what each other needs at the scene and who's going to handle what responsibility.
Is it all worth it? Yes. And it can't be minimized. The question becomes one of what is life worth, and I don't know, you can't put a price tag on it, the equipment and so on. It just can't be overemphasized. Taxpayers need to know why they're paying taxes. We're saving lives with tax money. That's it in a nutshell.
When renters complain about their living conditions, when neighbors notice a problem property, they often call the city, and a code enforcement inspector responds. Kristen Bodden is a residential code enforcement inspector. She started as an intern with a background in architectural technology at MATC.
A lot of times when you go to college, what you get is what's in the book or what you get from your teacher. You don't really get that experience you know, the field experience that you really need. Regarding this house, what I found when I first observed it were the porch skirt was defective, handrail was missing, handrail was defective, the porch needs to be painted, the column of the porch is defective, the foundation needs tuck pointing, a number of things, window screens that are defective, basement windows, and overall just a maintenance of this property that has been neglected for a while.
Since the program began, 17 interns have been hired, all moved into full-time positions. They come from and work in the community development block grant area of the city. 13 are still full-time inspectors.
What happens is we get an opportunity to actually have inspectors out in the field, training on what is expected of them doing the job as a code enforcement inspector. At the same time, they have an opportunity to go to school and learn the technical aspects of building inspection, code enforcement, and that benefits us. So it basically gives us, by the time they're ready for the code enforcement one position, a trained inspector.
Alderman Marvin Pratt worked to implement the program in 1995.
I really wanted to create more diversity in the building inspection department, and in an area where people needed jobs the most. They provided a service to the city that may not have been provided at a low cost. All of these positions, the intern positions, were paid for. It came through block grant dollars, community development block grant dollars. It didn't come through the regular O&M or city-operated maintenance budget, and so it didn't impact on the property tax rate.
Robert Jones is another former intern, now a commercial code enforcement inspector. A former public works inspector, he grew tired of layoffs, applied to the program, and is glad he did.
Well, I'm working 12 months a year now instead of just 9 or 10 or 8. So otherwise, yeah, it's proven to be more interesting too.
Requirements for the Code Inspector 1 position include 60 credit hours at MATC or a college degree in a related field. Commercial and residential inspections are basically the same.
Well, I went to the exits to make sure that when they have people in there that in case of a fire they can get out, that the exits aren't blocked, and that all you have to do is push the door to get out. I also looked at their heating system to see whether or not they had a fire enclosure, and that their boiler didn't have wires dangling off of it or dripping water or something like that. Now the maintenance part, that has to do with maintaining the property so that you can keep the neighborhood up. As far as painting and wooden trim falling down or siding going bad, we write violations up for that because you want the neighborhood to stay as it is or better.
Fire inspections are done yearly at commercial and multifamily units. A complaint by tenants or neighbors will result in a residential inspection. Owner-occupied homes are usually left alone.
We really don't do the interiors of owner-occupied dwelling units unless it's a life safety or life-threatening issue. But what we would do is an exterior survey if the owner-occupant is not keeping up the property. Basically, the penalty for non-compliance is a court case where you can receive fines anywhere from $150 to $10,000 per violation. And those fines have other penalties, including jail time and loss of licenses for 5 years. If you aren't able to comply for any reason, okay, contact the inspector and make sure the inspector knows what your situation is, because that inspector may also have help. We also have a number of programs in city government that can help property owners.
Interns concentrate on exterior housing inspection. They've surveyed some 9,000 properties since the program began, citing over 24,000 violations. The program will continue as long as it provides benefits to the city.
And then when you see the diversity of the group and the enthusiasm of the group and the upward mobility of the group, I would say to you, yeah, it is. It's probably the best, if not the best, one of the best ideas I've come up with.
Well, it ensures better living conditions for the residents of the city of Milwaukee. And it also gives a certain quality of life, a better quality of life, hopefully, for the residents of the city.
The poster depicts the Robert Anderson Water Tower and Municipal Building, named after the alderman who served the district for 32 years. Originally called the Town of Lake Water Tower, the unique Art Deco structure was built in 1938. When St. Stephen was built around 1850, that area was known as New Kellen. It grew up around the church and a saloon and dance hall known as the New Kellen House, a stop for travelers and area residents. The landmark building on South Howell still serves customers as it did 150 years ago.
They used to go to town with their wares and then stop off there and have lunch. Oh, yeah. And they'd have a 5-cent beer and a big dinner. They would give the dinner free with the lunch, with the drink.
Elsa's knowledge of what went on here comes from her experiences.
Well, I'll be 90 at the end of the year. I've been here all my life.
Where did you first, where were you born? Where did you first live?
In the middle of the airport where I was telling you there.
Mitchell International Airport marks Tippecanoe's southern boundary. About 60 years ago, the land south of Layton Avenue looked like this, mostly agricultural with a small airport, Hamilton Field. Elsa lived in the middle at what was 809 East Grange. Elsa's parents sold the home, which was in the family for nearly 100 years, for airport expansion in 1941.
It was a log cabin at first, and the log cabin we saved and built the house around it because my grandfather had built the log cabin.
Way out there in the country?
Yeah, it was way out because the bus only went, or the streetcar only went as far as Bolivar. Right. That's as far as it went. And the rest was all farmland.
On Bolivar, at the end of the streetcar line, travelers in 1903 found a cocktail lounge. Now Roberts, it's had only 3 owners in its 96 years.
And it was built by the Hulsbeck family. And at that time, they owned everything to the southwest and everything to the northeast, which is like an angle right across here. And at that time, there was a small park over there and a small lagoon, and it was called Hulsbeck Park.
The Hillsbeck family started their business to compete with John Saveland. His land, now in the Saveland Park area, had become a summer recreational area in the 1890s. He expressed his political views by naming his pond Tippecanoe after the slogan used by William Henry Harrison, our 9th president. He got the nickname as an Army general during a battle with Indians in the Tippecanoe area of the Indiana Territory. The intersection of Howard and Howell, named after 2 early Town of Lake farm families, became the Town of Lake Administrative Center. It soon picked up the Tippecanoe identity, which lives on in several buildings, including the branch library, built on the site of the original town hall. Among the first churches, Resurrection Lutheran, established in 1913. In 1917, Tippecanoe Presbyterian was built over a former barn and dance hall. The fieldstone foundation is still visible. Burdick School was built in 1925 to serve area children. There were still some dirt roads in the area when George Serwin began to teach at Burdick in 1948. The musicians he taught there and later at Bayview High School soon formed the nucleus of a new group. For many years, the Town of Lake Band carried on the original area name.
It says in the article, some article here, that people moved here so their children could go to the Burdick School and play in the band.
George still keeps in touch with some of the thousands of students he taught and believes the band helped promote the neighborhood.
Oh, definitely, because the parents moved into this neighborhood so their children could go here. The discipline they learned, that's one of the things when they call me, that's one of the things they talk about.
Through the years, spots like Robert's have been meeting places for area residents, and there are a lot of stories.
In fact, we had an older gentleman that used to come in here in his 90s when I first purchased the place, and used to tell me a story about how he used to come here and pick up his father in the old horse and buggy because his father had a little too much to drink sometimes.
One of the original owners of the tavern appears to have been one of the Tippecanoe neighborhood's most interesting residents.
When I purchased the place in '78, Bernadine Halsbeck was still alive. She was way in her 90s, and she used to come in, and it was kind of funny because she wouldn't come in till late at night yet because she was still a night person. She still smoked one cigarette after the other, and I had to laugh because in the back was a small room which was a poker room, and I made it into another dining area. And I said, I took your poker room away. She said, no, honey, meeting room. In her 90s, she still had that, you know, that sense about her, you know, because gambling still wasn't allowed, you know.
Many of the older Tippecanoe homes were built between 1910 and 1930 and are scattered throughout the historic core of the Tippecanoe neighborhood. The core is surrounded by many Cape Cod and ranch homes, nearly 2/3 of them built between 1945 and 1960. Tippecanoe, like many Milwaukee neighborhoods, an urban community with a distinct rural heritage.